Welcome to Confessions of an Implementer, a podcast by Talent Harbor. We share unique stories of implementers and the companies they've transformed to give you a rare glimpse into the successes and the challenges of the system in action. I'm your host, Ryan Hogan. Let's jump in. Hey, joining me on the show today, we've got Andy Platt. Andy started his career at Smuckers. Smuckers when it was just a fruit spread company, and he was a part of their hyper growth over 30 years, worked his way up from an analyst role in the finance all the way up to the chief information officer. And then he went from there and started teaching strategy at a university. And then he translated those skills and became an EOS implementer. We had an incredible conversation. It's no surprise that we talked a lot about strategy, which is something that's very near and dear to me, and understanding like how that strategy framework flows through EOS. And somebody that has taught strategy provided some amazing insights onto how EOS incorporates strategy into the overall framework. We talked a little bit about SWOT analysis, and we talked a lot about acquisitions and coaches and mentors, and just really an overall incredible conversation. Can't wait for you to hear. Thanks so much for listening. One of the things that I wanted to talk about today is you went from selling peanut butter and jelly to becoming an EOS implementer. Like, how did you make that leap?
I was 33 years with Smucker in different roles: finance, supply chain, IT. Became the company's chief information officer, and in all those roles, it was really all about helping the company succeed. And I always wondered what our secret sauce was at Smucker. And after I retired from Smucker, I was with the University of Akron in the College of Business. And one of the events I went to was a Dealmakers Conference through Smart Business, all about mergers and acquisitions. And somebody handed me a traction book. And I read it, and I was like, this is the secret sauce, that we had. It was all about our ability at Smucker, around strategy, around vision, around core values, our focus, our ability to implement our strategy. And when I read the book, I'm like, but this is great. This is a little bit different. It's been simplified, for entrepreneurial companies. And it just stuck with me. And after I retired from the University of Akron's College of Business, I was retired for a couple of years, and then I was like, this is something I've got to do. I've got to see if I can help smaller companies the same way that, with some of the same tools that we used at Smucker for our success.
That's incredible. And what was the role? What was the position that you started off at Smuckers?
Oh, my first role there was actually a manager of internal audit. Of internal audit. My prior life was I was an accounting undergrad major before I got my MBA, and I was in public accounting for a few years before I went to Smucker. And the first role was internal audit manager. That's
incredible. I mean, that's like from the bottom to the top at that point, all the way to CIO. So when you think about auditing and the finance side, like how do you go from that to getting on the information side or into the chief information officer?
My path, wasn't direct. My path, from internal audit went into an IT role. We were working on controls for IT, and a secondary part of the job was figure out what to do with that thing sitting in the corner. That thing sitting in the corner was an IBM PC, right? And my job became figure out how to use it and figure out how we can help the business, with the personal computer. And it became that. And I did a lot of training of, believe it or not, Lotus 1-2-3, which is a precursor product to Excel. After a few years, I kind of missed my financial roots and had an opportunity to get back into a sales accounting related position where I could use my financial skills, but always liked being close to the sales part of our business. And, so moved into that role. And after a few years in that role, I had an opportunity to become a division controller. And in the division controller role, it was a lot about sales and marketing, co-op advertising programs, but also got closer to the operational function, of our business. Of that division, we sold that division, and that kind of parlayed into or moved into a supply chain role where they wanted somebody with a financial knowledge and background in supply chain. One of the big initiatives in supply chain was a new order to cash and warehouse management system. So there you go. I'm working on systems again. This is about 15 years later. And then, before you know it, I was, elected the company's chief information officer because I understood finance, supply chain, and IT, all kind of rolled in together.
Yep.
And when you think, we talk about this a lot in the Navy, specifically a lot at the War College, and one of the programs specifically that I'm in called the Stockdale Leadership Development Concentration. And we talk about the difference between kind of like line officers or staff, and then making a leap into general officer, and like what the differences are, what the challenges are. Like when you go from a leader of a department or a leader of a division, maybe even when you first started there, an individual contributor, and moving your way all the way up the ranks to getting to the C-suite of a company of that size, what was different for you? Like, did your style of leadership, did your style of management have to change or adapt as you?
Oh, yeah, definitely I had to. I think early in my career, and I think early in anyone's career, it's first about what am I doing? What's the product? What's the skill that I bring? And then it's a little bit about, okay, where am I applying these skills? In the within the organization. Then over time, that evolves, into developing teams and helping others, develop their skills and help the organization. And that really elevates then into thinking like an owner and thinking about developing teams and then cross-team information, then thinking about business strategy and thinking about how do you make the entity succeed versus you individually maybe, or just the team, but how does everything fit, for the overall enterprise?
Got it. And when you talked about kind of this secret sauce, you alluded to when you read the book Traction, there were principles, frameworks, systems. There was things that you took away from Traction that you said like, hey, we were already doing things like this at Smuckers, maybe not to the degree or the exact way that the principles are. When you think back to the culture, like, did a lot of that have to do with the people and the culture that was created that enabled a lot of those systems and processes, or was there something else to the secret sauce?
Yeah, well, I think the secret sauce really was about first and foremost the conviction to core values. We called them basic beliefs. Smucker, EOS calls them core values. But first and foremost, it's by getting the right people inside your organization. Who think the way that makes your culture hum, the way that you understand and you developed it and discovered it and nurtured it, over time. And so that was one of the first things is, EOS really is the vision piece is about getting the right people in the right seats. So the first kind of commonality between, what I saw at Smucker and what I discovered in Traction was the strong commitment to core values. Then next, it was really about the core focus. It kind of blew me away. We were always, about discovering our why and our what, from a Smucker perspective. Why were we in business? Well, we were in business to, help companies celebrate memorable meals and moments together. And how we did that was through great branded products. And then I read, the book Traction, and all of a sudden they're talking about core focus, where your purpose, cause, or passion is why you do something, and your niche is what you do to act upon your core focus. And I'm like, wow, this is just amazing how these fit together.
And is that something that you and the leadership team or something that you observed that evolved over time at Smuckers, or was this something that, like, from the day that you started there until the day that I'm assuming that you retired,
right,
like the company just always knew why it existed?
I would say the answer to that question is yes. But there was a change, probably about a third of the way into my career at Smucker, where kind of our why and our what changed. There was, the first kind of 10 years of my career, maybe 7 to 10, we were focused on the why about our product. Our focus was about, we were a fruit-based company. We wanted to be the best fruit-based company we could be. And then we took a step back and reassessed our strategy and reassessed our why. And that's where we looked a little bit broader at who we were as a company. And it was about the time of the Jif and Crisco acquisition from Procter & Gamble, where we said, okay, we are much more than a jam and jelly company. We're a branded food products company, but the overarching why is because our brands are trusted, and as they're trusted, it's because we feel strongly and passionately about families and about what they're eating, what their their meal occasions. How do we help them have better meal occasions? And that's when the why and the what came together a little bit differently than it had before.
Got it. And it sounds like that evolution of the why and what was really kind of transformational for the company, because it almost sounds like it opened up the aperture to be able to dream bigger.
Exactly. To think not just about one product line and how we can be best in that product line, but we have a higher purpose and we have a bigger space, bigger sandboxes that we can now play in. And that's what led to a doubling of the business, another doubling of the business, and then another doubling of the business where, within a 10-year time period, we went from less than $1 billion in sales to about $6 billion. I think we hit $6 billion in sales, largely through acquisitions and then integration and growth of those acquisitions.
Got it. And is that a single individual? Like was that vision change or mission change in line with somebody new stepping into the most senior leadership role? Or was this something that just kind of happened naturally as the company continued to understand, like, wait a minute, like we actually do have something bigger here. Like we've got a brand that people trust and we can do a lot more with this brand and this trust than we're doing right now.
Yeah, it really was the same management team. It was Richard and Tim Smucker were fourth generational co-CEOs. And I think they started to think bigger and they really assessed we can only grow so much. As a jam and jelly as a fruit spreads company and we can be much more. And we always talked about having an infrastructure as a company that could manage a much larger company. We always talked about we have the talent, we've got the mindset to be a multi-billion-dollar company. How could we get there? And it was really through acquisitions, funded largely through some stock and through a little bit of debt, that we were able to make that happen, and our ability to get things done, our ability to implement as one of our core competencies that we that we really relied upon, that fueled our ability to grow.
And when you think about that in a company the size of Smuckers, and you think about this think bigger and this evolution and like we can do more, we're capable of more right now. We just need to push on the gas. Like when you translate that to either clients today or maybe I know you're an executive in residence as well, and so you probably see businesses and deal with entrepreneurs on a daily basis. How do you look at other companies and say like it might be time for your purpose, your core focus, your niche to change a little bit, to morph so that you can fully realize your potential?
A lot of that really is getting companies to think about their why versus their what. A lot of entrepreneurs were fueled by a why, but it was almost in the background. So they focus on a product and they start to leverage that product. And when I work with companies in our EOS, in our proven process, and we get to the part of core focus, which is the why and the what, there's a lot of interplay back and forth. And when we discover, that why, it really is a liberating experience for the owners and the leadership team of this can be much larger, than we are today, because our purpose, our passion is bigger than just our current product that we're very good at. But we can maybe think about this a little bit differently. We can think about new markets. We could think about some extensions. We could think about who we serve a little bit differently.
Yeah, it's funny because like I've always been kind of the opposite. Like I think our vision has always been way too big, way too early. It's always been something about world domination right out of the gate, and not spending the time to really like hone your craft, stay focused, get good at amazing, be best in the world at one thing, and then use that as a platform to expand. Like, do you ever see companies that are kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, like I was, where like the vision is something that's more world domination, and it's like, well, maybe we should hone that in or rein that in for the time being and get good at one thing?
Most of the clients that I work with are very good at their one thing or two things. So I haven't run across anyone yet that was kind of thinking too big and needed to be focused a bit. It's more of getting that synergy between their purpose, cause, or passion and what they are currently best in the world at to say, hey, we can take this up a notch.
And it would be fascinating to have you as an implementer, because with so much experience in like big company and going from an entry level position all the way up and kind of seeing like every part of the organization, the perspective you must bring into these smaller organizations, not small by any stretch, because if a company can afford a professional implementer, then they're already in the millions at that point, but certainly smaller than a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company. Like what are there experiences, skill sets? Are there things that you learned that came from the kind of the corporate world that you can then like translate, put through some sort of filter and say like, this is what you guys should do. Or maybe not this is what you guys should do, but like, based upon my expertise, this is some of the things that I saw as we continue to scale and maybe some things that you should think about.
One of the light bulbs that went off for me at Smucker and has helped in EOS is when we really understood that strategy was about implementation, not just developing the strategy, and strategy was about choosing what was important and what wasn't important. So we avoided chasing shiny things or, avoided the shiny stuff. And I think so that's really one thing. As my career progressed, went from functional understanding to building teams to, and I think I mentioned this before, to thinking like an owner. It's really how do you rally the organization around your strategy? Set your strategy so it's something that you can implement. Be intentional about what it is that you kind of want to accomplish. And when I read Traction and the 6 business disciplines, and I realized that the things that I learned at Smucker were about setting our right vision. They're getting right people in the right seats, about developing repeatable business processes. It was about being good at solving issues, not bearing your issues. It was good, let's have good solid data and let's have an ability to implement to gain traction and get the flywheel going in the business. So it wasn't necessarily the functional things that I learned in business, but it was about really the things that we teach and we help companies implement in EOS that we did and that I helped Smucker with in the corporate world that is kind of getting the flywheel going, in any size business, really.
And it's interesting because when you talk about that, I don't know why my brain went here, but immediately I started thinking about like Kodak and Blockbuster. And I'm sure you've studied this field of the food industry. So I'm sure there's 1,000 examples in the food industry that are similar to those where, you're sitting at the top, you've got an amazing product, but there's some sort of innovation and there's something that you're not tracking and out of nowhere, somebody flies right by you. What separates a good company from a great company? What separates Smuckers being able to accomplish what you guys accomplished over that time period versus other companies that may have been great or great during a certain period, but just other corporations just ran right by?
One of the things that we were able to do at Smucker, and I like to encourage my clients to do, is kind of check your ego at the door a little bit and take a really fresh look at external threats, external opportunities. Don't be afraid of structure and process. I know those may sound like two different things, but I've met some entrepreneurs along the way who really feel like their entrepreneurial creativity will be minimized if they put some structure into their business and structured thinking. And just the opposite, is true. If you can put some structure in your business to free yourself up to think about the things that you need to be thinking about, that's freed you up a bit to spot external trends and opportunities, to maybe look at what your competitors are doing and just don't be, really focused too internally on your business or too much about what you think you already know.
I love that response because immediately I think of Kodak and Blockbuster again. Like I think there were some emails that were released with Blockbuster when Netflix was coming up and Netflix wanted a certain amount and Blockbuster was like laughing at them and like barely took a meeting with them. And it's same with Kodak. And I think I read an article like Kodak actually had the first digital camera. And so like they were sitting on what would have taken them to the moon. And I just love the fact that you said check your ego at the door, because that's probably a lot to do with it. Like when you're sitting at the top and you're just like, this isn't worth my time, this isn't worth my attention, or we're already here. You talked a little bit about strategy. One of the issues that I'd always had with EOS, not with the system, loved the system. One of the things we always had to try and figure out how to augment was the actual strategy side. And I say that, like, when we were scaling Hunt to Killer, the big thing for us was like instilling accountability, getting the right people in the right seats, and doing all these things, setting your rocks. And we did a good job of those things. At certain points, I felt like we were doing things, and like we understood where we wanted to be in 10 years. We had our 3-year picture. We understood what our 1-year goals were, and we baked them into some sort of quarterly rocks. But sometimes I felt like we were actually missing a holistic strategy, like a glue that took all of these things that we were doing and brought it together and really allowed everybody to understand why. Like, it's not that we're chasing this 10-year target of $1 billion. It's not just because we close our eyes for the 3-year picture and have this amazing vision of what we want to be when we grow up. But really, like, taking it from a strategic level, bringing it up from tactical, up from operational, a strategic level. I feel like we struggled with that. Is there, like, do you see those same sort of struggles, or is there something that you do to help companies understand, like, this is how you think strategically and incorporate strategy into EOS?
Yeah. The EOS process is a simplified approach to strategic planning. And by design, it's for entrepreneurial companies. And our sweet spot of companies are, we have some larger and some smaller, but our sweet spot of companies is companies with employees between 10 and 250 employees. Our approach to strategy at Smucker was probably deeper and broader, than some of the things we might bring in EOS. But the beauty of EOS is its simplicity. And one of the things that I'll give credit to Tim Smucker for this is he had a number of sayings that were inspirational. But one is, and I think it was Leonardo da Vinci, is simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication. And what I like about EOS is that it's not overcomplicating the strategy. We're an entrepreneurial operating system, and the thought is that the strategy is kind of within the minds of the founder of the company, within the leadership team. And so we broaden the thinking from just the owner to the leadership team and take that down through the organization. So when we think about core focus and 10-year target, we're really doing that with a broad level of thinking of why are you in business? What can you be best in the world at? We challenge that thinking each year. So in our process, we have an annual session that's all about team health, but it's also all about broadening the thinking of, is there something, should we be thinking about our company different? We do SWOT analysis on an annual basis, and think about external opportunities, external threats. And we can take that as deep as a company feels they need to go, on their SWOT analysis. So we have all the elements of what a strategic planning process is, but we're at a simplified approach first. If we need to go deeper, certainly we can go deeper with our client companies.
Got it. That's really interesting. I never thought about like that. Like, strategy is almost like baked into the system or the process, and it gets back.
It really is.
Yeah. No, that's a great way to think about it, and it's a way that I've never actually thought about before.
I taught strategy at the University of Akron for a few years after I retired. And one of the things that I shared with my students, both at undergrad and graduate level, and this is one of our kind of major tenets at Smucker, is strategy is about choosing to do some things and not others. And so a lot of it is the discipline about what you're choosing to do and also what you're choosing not to do, so you don't get off course about what's really important.
Yes. And where you apply those resources.
Exactly.
It's interesting. Like when I looked at other companies, especially bigger companies, like one of the things there is always like, well, they have an endless amount of resources. Like, it must be so nice to just be able to think up something and be able to do it. And a couple things were interesting. No matter how big we got at Hunt to Killer, whether we were a $500,000 company shipping a couple subscription boxes with 5 people, or a $50 million company with 150 people, like, there was always a resource constraint. And all I hear from about big corporations is like, what do you think? Like, we don't have budgets, or we don't have, like, we can think of anything and do it?
Yeah, I've never been in a environment with endless resources or unlimited resources. That whether it's at the corporate level, in the university and academic field, or with a smaller entrepreneurial company, prioritizing resources to the right things, really is part of the secret sauce of success.
Yeah. I didn't even realize that you taught strategy, and now I'm like deeply curious to go deep on strategy. Like you've already said that a big part of strategy is choosing the things to do, and maybe even more importantly, choosing what not to do, so that you can focus and align on those things. What are some other things that are just like these were the largest tenets of the curriculum, and based upon my experience and what I taught, like this is strategy?
A lot of the strategy theory in textbooks started off with what will you do and what won't you do. Then it got in a little bit more of how will you get that done. So a lot of our work was around in strategy was, are you going to compete on price? Are you going to compete on some unique product attributes about your core focus? So we were a lot about mission, about vision, but then we get down to, working with our students and teaching that you can't be all things to all people, is that you really have to choose, how you are going to deliver on your mission and your vision. And when I translated that into EOS speak, our EOS terminology is, how will you deliver on your core focus? And we do that, in EOS, in our marketing strategy, it's about who will you talk to and what do you want to tell them? Who are your customers that you're serving, and what are your three uniques? What are you best in the world at? And academically, I would work with students on how would company A, company B, company C, we'd bring some real case studies in, we'd bring some successes, we'd bring some failures, into the mix. But it's how uniquely will you deliver, why are you unique to your competitors? What are the 1, 2, 3 things, that make you unique from your competitors? Why does somebody want to do business with you versus someone else?
And when you look through the kind of common issues as you're looking at case studies of strategies that have failed, does it always just point to like they were doing the wrong things or they were doing too many of the things? Like what are some things that you derive from those case studies that are very common?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is not totally understanding your criteria that you're making your decisions within. So a lot of times companies will make a poor acquisition or launch a product line. They weren't really true to their core focus, or they aren't true to the criteria that they set out for a specific decision. Saw different case studies where companies failed at an acquisition because they didn't get the synergies they wanted, when in reality they never really had the appropriate plans in place to gain the synergies that they wanted, or it was something that wasn't focused on, a sweet spot of their business.
Got it. And when you think about growth by acquisition, is that really what it comes down to? Like when you look at some of the successes, is like the two things, like does it fit in the core focus? Does it fit the thesis or the criteria that the company has set? And then is there good synergies between the cultures? Is that kind of the checks in the box for that?
I'm not saying every company has to grow through acquisition. It's if your strategy is to grow through acquisition. One of the other things that is kind of textbook strategy is will you have a centralized approach to your management structure, or is it a decentralized compete for resources type of thing, like the old GE model that was out there of it doesn't have to be in the same industry, but we bring management knowledge to these different companies in different industries. So it's about having your strategy and understanding why you're making the decisions that you're making, kind of not being too abstract or hoping that something that you've hit upon a sweet spot, but being intentional about a new product launch or a new service that you're offering or a company that you're acquiring, just understanding why you're doing it, how it will fit, and what you need to do to make it successful.
So going back to like today, you are an EOS implementer. And so you are helping businesses succeed through the application of the principles outlined in Traction. Like what are some kind of common hot areas you see? Like as you're onboarding a new client, like what are some things kind of right out of the gate where you've got to be you've got to take extra care in that certain area to make sure that the organization is ready to move forward on this new framework?
Yeah. One of the things that we teach in EOS is we talk a lot about vision and answering the 8 key questions, of core values, core focus, 10-year target, 3-year picture, marketing strategy, getting, all the way down to 90-day, 1-year plan and 90-day rocks. But we really start with what we call traction first, vision second when we implement. So the two things that in many cases that we teach in our first day with clients in our focus day is the accountability chart, which is your organization with the key roles of your leadership team. Sometimes that's never been documented, or it's never been documented with the clarity to which we document it. And then secondly, let's get into a meeting cadence. Let's get into a meeting pulse that on a weekly basis, here's your agenda, and let's get stuff done. Let's get shit done. I've had some clients who just literally called this transformational because they never met on a regular basis before. They never had an accountability chart before where everybody knew clearly what their roles were. And it's as simple as it sounds. Sometimes when you're caught up in your business and all the day-to-day and fighting fires, and getting out ahead of those fires is sometimes a new concept for businesses.
Yeah. One of the lifesavers that biggest benefits of the level 10 meeting for us was we have Slack and we were operating remote. And essentially what would happen is when anybody has an idea or an issue, like it was an immediate communication of that idea or that issue, and it went to the person directly or went into a main channel. And like you have to stop what you're doing, whether you're working on your rock or whether you're working on your day-to-day, and you have to take care of that. And I thought one of the interesting things about EOS is, like, generally speaking, there aren't fires that can't wait 1 to 6 days to get to the next L10. And so you just put it up on the issues board. So instead of bogging people down throughout the week, because if you extrapolate that over, let's say the organization's 50, and let's say 10 people are doing that and 10 people are distracting another, 20 people. Now you've got 30 people that are distracted with a problem that could have waited for an environment in which is more conducive for problem solving as a team.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the beauties of the weekly L10 meeting is the group decides what are, in a cadence, what are our top 3 priorities that we need to solve right now? What are the top 3 issues? Then what are the next 3? Then what are the next 3? And everything's visible and everything. Okay, we'll talk about that next week. You're absolutely right. The prioritization over time helps teams become what we like to call better predicting teams, of understanding what's important today, what's important this week, and what can wait until next week or even next month.
Yep. And you talked a little bit about the accountability chart. The accountability chart different from the organizational chart or org chart, but by really trying to identify what are the top 3 to 5 things that individual does. Like when you enter an organization, do you find it a lot where you ask somebody, not necessarily oh, what is it that you do here? Because I think maybe that only happens on TV, but this idea of people are like, well, in my job description, it says I do these 27 things. How do you help them with the accountability chart and really kind of roll out a system or an architecture in which everybody, the entire organization is now on the same page?
Our approach to accountability chart, which is an org chart on steroids, but we like to start with structure first and people second. So we start first with what's the structure you need in your organization to get done the challenges that are facing you in the next 6 to 12 months. And the accountability chart becomes a dynamic, ongoing tool for companies to tweak roles for individuals or to relook at the structure every quarter of what are the challenges facing us and what's the structure need to be. So we take a structure first and people second approach. And then we start first with the leadership team and then cascade that down into the organization. So it's not just starting with, tell me everything you're doing. It starts with what seats or first functions do you need to lead your organization? Then what seats do you need in the organization, to succeed in the next 6 months, 6 to 12 months? And it becomes a kind of 2 things. It's a right people, right seat issue. And you find out if you have any seats that you need in your organization that currently you don't have anyone to fill. And you might need to put somebody into that seat, or you may have a hiring opportunity. So it's not tell me everything that you're doing now and fit this into a box. We start with what do you need to be doing? let's define that. Let's put people in those seats, and there gets a little bit of rearrangement of the seats on the deck.
I love it. As you've gone through your career, both at Smuckers and what you do now and teaching, like, have there been mentors or kind of people around you, whether it's like somebody putting their arm around you and helping show you the way, or somebody that you could reach out to when you had problems of your own? Did you have mentors as you continue to kind of progress through your career?
Oh, clearly. I had many mentors, during my career at Smucker, many of whom I stay in touch with today, and couldn't have really grown the way that I did in my career without that mentorship. And I like to think that I mentored some folks along the way, as well. Mentorship is just extremely important for individual and team growth and organization growth.
Yep. And when you think about mentorship, is this something in which, like, it gives you a soundboard or somebody to call, or is it somebody that is paired up? Like, I've seen this in different ways throughout organizations, and at Hunt to Killer we used to have a we didn't call it a battle buddy. That's what we say in the military. But we basically had someone, as soon as they stepped foot through the door, we had somebody that partnered with that individual, and it couldn't be in their chain of command. So it had to be from a different department. And it should have been at a similar level, but it's somebody that, like, already understood the culture, already understood EOS, and could kind of help guide this individual throughout the enterprise. Like, how have you seen, like, mentorship done right? And I don't know if you have any examples of it done wrong, but what's your suggestion there?
The best environment I've seen for mentorship is when it's a help first environment. And that's really one of the EOS principles of help first. And in that way, everybody kind of becomes a mentor. If the mentality is, how can I help you? And having a culture that it's okay to ask for help. So I was at the university, we got students involved in a mentoring program, and we paired them up with corporate mentors. But it was really, we worked with the students of how to ask for help in a mentoring, because it wasn't coaching. Coaching is different than mentoring. And, a mentorship is basically somebody who's there to help you, through those rough spots. But you need to be able to be open to that mentorship. You need to be able to ask your mentor for what you're struggling with. You need to be a little bit open and honest, with your mentor. So I like to see the onus of mentoring more on the mentee, than the mentor. You have to, it's important to have a mentor, but you need to be open and have your eyes open to finding who can be a good mentor for you.
It's so interesting because you just talked about coaching is not like, a coach is not necessarily a mentor. Like, what in your mind, like, what's the difference between a coach and a mentor? And it might be something as simple as you just said, which it's like the onus is more on the mentee. But in your mind, what's the difference?
In coaching, your coach is trying to help you develop from within according to maybe their knowledge into a framework. When I coach, I'm coaching into the EOS framework to help companies succeed and individuals succeed in a framework. In a mentoring relationship, it's more of a mentee is seeking some specific advice on a blind spot, or, trying to take maybe advantage of a specific place that mentor has been, or where that mentor can help unlock something external, that is important to that individual. And I don't know if that's the greatest explanation, but I think there is a little bit difference in coaching and mentoring, and I think a coach is being a little bit more proactive, with a group of people. We're in a mentor-mentee relationship. I've always seen it where the best success is if the mentee is driving and opening themselves up, to the mentor, to help establish that relationship.
I love that. I mean, there's so much logic behind that. I don't know, like, when I think about a coach, like, typically you pay coaches, like you can go get a life coach, a health coach, an accountability coach. But you're absolutely right, because, like, the onus is generally on that coach. You're paying that coach, they're providing a service, or maybe you're not paying them.
Maybe yeah, right.
Yeah. And it's their job to figure out how to optimize you. Whereas a mentor mentee, it's really on the mentee. They like not only to seek out the answers and help really kind of drive the agenda and drive like the skill set that they're trying to, but also like find the right one, like you said. Finding somebody that's been there, done that, and that can really kind of help show you the ropes. I love it, Andy. Andy, when if someone's listening to this podcast right now and they're like, I need Andy, like his experience in on the corporate side, his moving all the way up the ladder and now then going and teaching some of this stuff in business strategy at a university and now getting into EOS as an EOS implementer. Like, I need this person's help. They've got the skill set that I'm looking for. How would they find you?
If they did an EOS Google search, Andy Platt, they would see my profile and they could ping me with an email at andy.platt@eosworldwide.com.
Love it. And last question, if you could have coffee, if you drink beer, then beer, wine, maybe it's just coffee. But if you could have a cup of something with any EOS implementer, who would it be?
I had the opportunity. We have quarterly collaborative exchanges where all of our implementers get together and we sharpen our saw and we learn from each other and we learn, just more intricacies and the beauty of EOS. I actually had the opportunity to meet Gino Wickman. Gino's that, now that he's sold his company, he's an EOS implementer. He still comes to those quarterly exchanges and I've met Gino and talked a little bit to Gino, but I'd love to just sit down and have coffee with Gino.
Love it. Awesome. Andy, thank you so much for coming on. This was great. I haven't gotten down the strategy topic and the path that we went down. I think there's just so many valuable insights on this. I just want to thank you for coming on.
Ryan, it was my pleasure. It was great talking with you.
Awesome. Thanks.
Confessions of an Implementer is brought to you by Talent Harbor. To find out more about Talent Harbor and our fractional services and talent search solutions for businesses, visit talentharbor.com. And then make sure to search for Confessions of an Implementer in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. And on behalf of the team here at Talent Harbor, thanks for listening.